You think that you could stop us, world? Did you think that you could stop us because we were talking so much positive psychology that the internet started to collapse on itself? You cannot stop Mark Cordone and Lisa Avery. So, Lisa,
never.
We talked about this. We talked about how we ever came together and we joined forces. The world would implode on itself. So welcome to the second.
And look what happened.
Well, this is good with the numbers too, right? Because this is the second half of Golden Microphone 22. So you got your 222. So we've got some good juju in terms of those numbers for today. But talk to me again. What is this positive psychology 2.0? Because it seems like the first positive psychology wave that came out was more of a let's focus on the shits and giggles. Let's focus on the happy stuff. What is this new positive psychology that's coming out?
Absolutely. So I think the second wave positive psychology was really the realization that life needed something much deeper. It needed something more than pleasure. Pleasure in itself, it comes and goes, as do positive emotions. They come and go, they're fleeting. Whereas positive psychology, the second wave, it was about something that we can hold on to as human experience. It was about a much broader sense of human experience and what it means to be a human being. And we're not always positive. We're not always in happy circumstances. So positive psychology part 2 was about what to do when negative circumstances arise, and how we can rise above those circumstances and become a better version of ourselves. So for me, it's about self-transcendence. It's about becoming that best version of yourself, which is, the pinnacle of Maslow's hierarchy. Yep. But then it's about going beyond that. Few people know, Mark, that actually above self-actualization is self-transcendence. This was in Maslow's later work and was never actually published, but it's that. And I've seen this from my own research. People are really happy when they work in a vocation because they entwine their strengths, talents, passions, and they have moments of flow, and that feels amazing. But what really makes that difference, it's the impact. It's going beyond oneself. And so also, for me, positive psychology part 2, it's about reaching out to other human beings and creating that sense of legacy. That is the eudaimonia aspect that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, and by eudaimonia, you meaning living that good, purposeful, fulfilled life versus a happiness that's like more fleeting, right?
Absolutely.
So let me ask you this: we're going into the dirty deep part of like the stuff that I love about positive self-transcendence and self-actualization. What is that? What is truly the difference between self-actualization and self-transcendence? Because, we used to have that pyramid, right? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And then when you got to that, it was like this very it was sort of this supreme being sort of thing that was going on, right? So what does that self-transcendence piece look like?
I think that's a brilliant question. I think there's a very, very, very fine line between the two, but whilst ever we're thinking about self-actualization, yes, we're thinking about becoming the best version of ourselves, but we're thinking about existing in the world in a very natural, spontaneous, harmonious way. We're feeling very at one with ourselves and the rest of the world. Yet there's still some kind of ego involved because we're thinking about how we're feeling, Self-transcendence, on the other hand, we lose that ego. I think the simple answer to that question, Mark, would be we lose that sense of ego. It's not about us anymore, it's about other people. And that's why the people that I've observed who are able to lose that sense of ego, they have this incredible sense of well-being that even self-actualized people don't necessarily always have, It's this incredible sense of well-being that comes from the fact you're no longer thinking about yourself. And that's very refreshing because, as human beings, we spend most of our time really deeply inside our heads with all of this negative self-chatter. But when we lose ourselves in service of something bigger and better than just ourselves, that's when we do remarkable things as human beings,
Yeah, so does self-transcendence look like, okay, I'm giving away all my clothes, I'm Gandhi, I'm Mother Teresa. What does that look
No.
like?
Yeah, I don't think it has to be anything anywhere near as dramatic, but it means on a daily basis, just really putting yourself out in the world and trying to make a positive difference, trying to have one of those micro moments of love. Maybe you want to go out and do some charity work. Maybe you really want to find and create your vocation. But if not, it just means showing up in the world in your best possible way and really, giving a little bit of positive emotion, which as Barbara Fredrickson, proved, it spreads, it opens, it goes to the next person, and the next person then treats the following person in a better way, in a brighter way, in a more authentic, natural way. So, positive emotions literally broaden and build our repertoire, our emotional and psychological repertoire. So I think, you don't have to go out there and do something incredible. You just have to be yourself very authentically. And that usually means that, you want to go beyond yourself, because human beings, we're not selfish people. We have this altruistic tendency, and I think in our natural state, human beings are good. And so we just need to really get to that natural state, which is kind of like an onion, stripping away the layers of onion until you come to the core. We don't need to add on to what we are. We need to take away from what we're not,
I really love that idea too, because there's such there's such this idea that, like, if you do become the higher aware you become, or the more you begin to practice self-transcendence, the more you lose touch with the sort of the trappings of wearing a t-shirt and all that kind of stuff. But also at the same time, you can be in a state of self-transcendence by just being, understanding that there's something larger than yourself that exists out there.
Yeah,
and this was something that was a big deal when I taught a class in positive psychology, because the entire class was spent talking about how we make ourselves happy. How can we be happier? How can we do this? And I won't talk about the exercise, but I'll talk about it with you, like, offline. But we did this exercise where we separated people in different groups, and some people got stuck in a room. I guess I am going to talk about it live.
Go for it.
So the question became, for the people who were out of the room, the assumption was that you passed the class and you were happy, and then the people who were stuck in the room, they were still struggling. And so for the people who were already self-actualized, what was their responsibility, for lack of any other term, to go back and open the door to let the other people out? Does that make any sense?
Sure. Yeah, it does, Mark, it does. But I think when a person is genuinely in a state of self-actualization, they feel so much at one with themselves that really the boundary between self and other, it kind of comes to a blur anyway. It's kind of blurry. And I think, when you're feeling that great about yourself, and you're at the peak, you're where you should be, then you naturally, we're expansive. We open ourselves up to the rest of the world. And then the natural state, the natural progression, it's self-transcendence. But I think it's really important to add that absolutely nobody on this planet lives in one blessed permanent state of either of these. These come and go. We might have, a glimpse of this every other day or every other week. Nobody lives in this blessed harmonious state, which I think is really important to highlight to your listeners, that, it's not about setting any one particular goal in life, because the idea of hedonic adaptation, we get used to whatever happens, no matter how good or bad, we always get used to things, which means that no one single goal will ever make us happy. What makes us feel any kind of well-being on a permanent level, on a permanent basis, it's that feeling of progression. It's that feeling of moving on, it's that feeling of continually growing in every aspect of life. I think, Mark, there's a real danger in thinking about, I want to arrive to this state of self-actualization or self-transcendence. It doesn't exist. These are just moments, but moments which we should aspire to, because they're very enriching. But the idea, it's continual progression.
Absolutely. So let me ask you. So let me ask you this. The idea of hedonic adaptation, sort of the way that I think about it is that, like, if you think of happiness being a cold room, you walk into the cold room and you experience happiness, right? But after you've been there for a little while, you get used to that level of cold, right?
Yes.
So there's another thing out there called the hedonic treadmill, right? Where it's almost like we're constantly chasing happiness. What is the difference between hedonic adaptation and the hedonic treadmill? Because so many people nowadays are saying that they're chasing happiness and they don't know when they'll ever find it.
Absolutely. I think the hedonic treadmill, it comes before knowing that hedonic adaptation exists. Because once you're aware that nothing you're chasing is ever going to bring you any permanent satisfaction, that is when you start looking inwards for any kind of fulfillment. You know, it's this difference between happiness, you know, fleeting positive emotions, and fulfillment and a sense of meaning. And I think, you know, we distract ourselves with the former. So we distract ourselves with, you know, going out, getting drunk, having incredible food, etc., you know, any kind of vice that you can think of, shopping, spending, consumerist society. But it's just distraction, you know, and there comes a moment when you just need to take all of that away and really look inside, you know, sit in silence. You know, most people, Mark, are very uncomfortable about sitting in silence and hearing their own thoughts. You know, no TV, no radio, just listening to yourself, getting really in touch with who you are. And sometimes that comes at an existential crisis point, and other times, you know, people actively go about, you know, looking for who they are and what's going to make them happy. But my recommendation would be to start some of that self-exploration before anything negative comes your way. You know, be proactive about this.
So we've talked about a whole bunch of things right now. Like, we're going into self-actualization, self-transcendence. We're talking about hedonic adaptation. Like, y'all, make sure that you watch this replay, because this is like positive psychology master's level stuff right here. For free, loving it.
Absolutely.
Let's start to integrate these together for folks who are looking for their vocation, looking to create their vocation.
Sure. Absolutely. So I think, you know, what the first place to start really when thinking about this, again, it's to go back to your authentic self and the way you show up in the world. So once again, getting in touch with those strengths, perhaps taking the Myers-Briggs personality inventory. I think that's a great place too. Thinking about your personality, your strengths, your values, because ultimately, you know, what you do, they're going to be to serve those values. You know, the kind of life you want to create is going to be a life that is aligned with those values while using your strengths to create that. Think about the moments when you're in flow, you know, so when you lose yourself because you're so actively engaged, you're so absorbed in what you're doing that time just seems to stand still. You're just not aware of time, you know. Think about those moments. Very often we're very detached as adults from those moments. So think about when you were a kid, you know, what did you used to love to do? What would you do with the rest of your life if nobody was watching and if you weren't going to get paid for it? You know, these are the things that intrinsically motivate us, you know, where the motivation comes from the inside. There's no external reward. Think about these moments and think about how, with the strengths you have, with the values that you hold, think about with those kind of moments of flow that you experience, try to think of circumstances, of ways in which you can use these in the world, you know. And it might not be perhaps creating a new job. It might be actually, you know, thinking about how you can bring more of this into the work that you're actually already actively working in. You know, it's this idea, Mark, that people see work in three different ways. It can be a job, it can be a career, or it can be a vocation. So a job, you know, it's just a means to an end. A career, this is thinking about your progression, your path, you know, the status that comes with it. And finally, a calling or a vocation. And that is where, you know, your identity and what you do, they become beautifully entwined. And I believe that everybody can and perhaps should aspire to the third, because that, you know, that is living on a level of meaning that is just so profound and is perfect.
Sure. Now, what, let's say that there's some folks right now that are like, gosh, I know exactly what it is I'd love to do, and I know what gets me in flow. But I'm stuck in a job, or I'm stuck in a career, or I'm afraid to take that leap. What do you have to say to folks like that who are going through that right now?
So I think, first of all, they've got to make it seem a little bit more real by telling someone. I think all too often we keep these ideas and these aspirations in our mind. In our mind, we've got the imposter syndrome. Our mind tells us we're never going to be good enough. It's the fear that's kicking in. We're never going to make it. We're too old. We're too this. We're too that. First of all, I would try to articulate that out loud. And actually, there's something I would do at the same time to really get clear about my vision, because sometimes a lack of clarity, I think, can really lead to procrastination. So perhaps the very first step would be to do a beautiful exercise, which I'm sure you're aware of, Mark, called My Best Possible Self. And this is where, like we were talking about before with the writing, the journaling exercise, this is where for 4 consecutive nights, 20 minutes each night, take a piece of paper, free flow, about your best possible self. So what your life will look like. Now, the psychological trick here is to use the present tense. So you say, I'm living in New York, I'm going to these places, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Really try to evoke as many of the senses as possible, make it real, make it vivid. Just describe without any kind of inhibitions what your best possible life would look like. Mark, because all too often when people have this conversation in their head, the fear kicks in, they start to filter what they want. Yeah. Be totally unfiltered, just let it all out, and do this for 4 consecutive nights and feel how the surge of energy, the clarity, the excitement, really, really get that motivation going. And hopefully at this point, the motivation is going to be intrinsic, because you're going to be coming from your heart. You're going to be talking about the life that you would really love to have, rather than the life that other people think you should be having. And I think that is the key, really separating what is intrinsic from extrinsic.
Gotcha. So 4 nights, best possible self exercise, 20 minutes. Speaking in the present versus saying, I want this, or I hope this. This is living it, basically. You're narrating your dream in the present. The second thing that I heard was something that I personally feel is a big deal: making the declaration, telling somebody else, right?
Yes. Absolutely. Making that declaration.
Yeah.
To make it. Yeah. Sorry, Mark. Sorry.
No worries. This is your stage. Sorry.
Not at all. Please, Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think in terms of making the declaration, one way you can consider this, and I've said this so many times, is that oftentimes once we know what it is that we want to become, or we're on the journey to becoming that best self, right? We'll come across some internal or external obstacles, right? And one of the strongest ways to combat that obstacle is to throw your backpack to the other side of the wall. That's what Tal Ben-Shahar calls it, right?
That's beautiful.
Take your backpack and throw it to the other side of the wall. That's making a declaration. And when you make a declaration, what happens is that suddenly, number one, you can't really walk away anymore because you've made the declaration. A lot of people could sneak around in fear, being like, okay, there's the wall, I'll walk away. Or they could come up to the wall and say, okay, here's a wall. I'm going to wait for Mr. Right or Mr. Wrong to come, or Mr. Right or Mrs. Right to come and solve this for me.
Yes.
Or when you make that declaration, okay, my food, my laptop, my bad internet is on the other side. And to be a better coach, I've got to find a way to get in front of this camera. I've got to find a way to climb this wall. I'm going to join the Beyond Resilient crew. They're going to give me a boost. This shirt will become ropes to help me get to the other side. You become more creative. Is that what I'm feeling? Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. Beautifully put. Absolutely. Perfectly expressed there, Mark. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Absolutely. And by expanding your network and really including other people in your goals, these are when the goals become a little more self-transcendent. It comes about other people. And these kind of goals really have a higher level of success, because so much less ego is involved. So I think, by including other people, by saying we're in this together, you're absolutely exponentially increasing your possibility of success in whatever you're looking for.
Yeah. Also, at the same time, there's the idea of perception theory. When you've made that declaration, people perceive you in a different way, which has an impact on the way that you perceive yourself.
Absolutely.
Right? As people, as people see you making the declaration to be a coach, being tenacious about things, they're like, dang, Lisa's really like making it happen. And then you hear it coming from them, and that helps with your esteem and your drive as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Perfectly expressed. You really start to embody that, it changes the way you sit, the way you stand. You really begin to feel it in every cell of your body. So I think that is highly, highly powerful. The whole fake it till you make it, but there's so much truth in that. Absolutely, Mark.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. So what else in terms of in terms of going after this vocation, meaningful what else would you have to say are things that we can think about? Because so much of what you talked about today is really meaningful work, right? Is there anything that we might have missed?
I don't think anything that we've necessarily missed, but I just want to highlight once again that all of this is a journey. This is absolutely not about the destination, because once again, even people who work within their vocation, and I've been very fortunate to speak and to interview some of these incredible people, not every single day feels like this blessed, perfect state, so that there's always going to be the ups and downs, the highs and lows in any kind of work. But I think if on a weekly, monthly basis, you're feeling aligned, you're feeling connected, and your body knows that, you can feel it in your emotions, you can feel it in your body. You know when you are and you aren't living in alignment with your core self, with your authentic self. So when, week after week, month after month, when you have that feeling of just a kind of well-being, being at peace, being at one with yourself, you're probably onto a good thing. But on the other hand, if you're feeling anxious, frustrated, like there's something just not quite right in your life, it may be that it's time to dig a little bit deeper and to see which eudaimonic aspects, so which deeper, more meaningful aspect of your life perhaps needs some work. It's this whole thing that I'm sure you've spoken about before, Mark, of PERMA. So Martin Seligman, the father of positive psychology, has this wonderful acronym for a very holistic view of happiness, which is the P for positive emotions, the E for engagement, the R for relationships, the M for meaning, and the A for accomplishment. Now, for me, Mark, work gives us the opportunity to experience most of these. The positive emotions, the relationships, that sense of meaning. Work has this outlet, this incredible outlet for meaning. And I think all too often people resign themselves to the fact that work, it's something that we're not going to enjoy. It's something that we simply have to endure. And it's such a shame when it offers such a rich source of meaning. And I feel that everybody needs to access that and tap into that in some way or another.
Absolutely, and the PERMA model has been used so widely, from higher education models to, like, I think it was even tested in the Army when it was originally out there. So definitely, for those of you who are interested in some of these ideas of flourishing, definitely look that up. The book that it's introduced in is called Flourish by Martin Seligman.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
brilliant.
How can we keep in touch with you aside from bad internet?
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Absolutely, Mark. So you can find me on a couple of websites. One is www.workisvocation, all one word, workisvocation.com. That's my personal website. And then we have the Positive Psychology for Schools website, which is really fun as well, if you want to check that out. And that is www.growingwithgratitude, all one word, growingwithgratitude.com.au. AU for Australia, because it originally comes from Australia. So either of those two websites, I would absolutely love to have any more conversations with anybody about any of these subjects. So absolutely, that would be the way, Mark.
That is awesome. Lisa, you've said enough for now.
I think I have more than enough, probably.
No, you haven't. No, you haven't. I feel like I could talk to you for hours about this stuff.
Oh.
Actually, I have one other question before we wrap the show up. So we've had positive psychology, the original. Then we had positive psychology 2.0, which is the current wave. What do you think positive psychology 3.0 is going to look like?
Ooh, that is an incredible question. My goodness, I wish I had thought of this before. Positive psychology part 3. So we've had bad of human experience. For me, Mark, I guess it's just going to be a smoother integration of the two, because right now they're pretty separate. They're pretty distinct. You know, there's good and there's bad, and we still have those labels. I would like to see a positive psychology which integrates them in a much smoother way, you know. Right now, we're on the road to that. We're getting there, but I don't yet feel that people really acknowledge the need for both. You know, we have the angel and we have the devil, and we have to reconcile that, you know, in ourselves on a daily basis. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see that recognized in positive psychology part 3. That would be my prediction. Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Because I don't know how to answer myself either.
No, I have no idea. I'd never ever considered there could be a positive psychology.
That was fantastic. Lisa Avery, coach, positive psychologist, working in schools, all this knowledge. I cannot thank you enough for pushing through the technical difficulties. I believe it was all worth it to have this conversation. I'm hoping we get to continue this conversation and we're friends for much longer than this.
Definitely.
But as the show comes to an end, I don't know if you know why this is called the golden microphone, but we're going to show you why it's called the golden microphone here.
Okay.
So if you will, this is kind of a visualization exercise. And so with the end of the show, I want you to imagine that a golden mic is descending from your ceiling, right? And it's stopping right in front of you, right? And this golden mic, it translates into every single language, and everyone is listening, and it only works for 2 minutes or less.
Okay.
So what is it that you're going to say in the golden mic? Go.
Absolutely. So I would say there's one thing and only one thing we need to know to reach any level of happiness, fulfillment, and meaning. And that is to become really authentic to who we are. That is to become really aligned with our innate strengths, values, passions, and to find a way to serve ourselves and the rest of the world with what we have to offer. And at that moment, we've got to realize that it's not about goals. It's about a continual sense of progression, continually growing into who you want to become. You're never, ever going to reach that place, but you're going to constantly evolve. And that to me is a life well lived, you know, and keeping in mind with that a sense of gratitude for each and every day that comes, a sense of curiosity, being open to everything that's new, and really learning how to savor that moment, savor yourself and savor the people around you. To me, that is all there is. There isn't anything else. So really embracing authenticity, because that is the answer to every possible question.
You're like,
sorry, got nothing else to say about that.
I'm done here. Well, Lisa, thank you so much. That is Golden Microphone 22 with all the glitches. We are still not canceled. You can't take us off the air. We've got too many good guests. Hopefully you'll be back again, Lisa. Best of luck with everything. We've got a couple really cool guests this month, and don't forget the book. Pick it up in the Beyond Resilient crew. My name is Mark Cordone. Live hedonically, live eudaimonically, and flourish. Take care.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you.